everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe,
And I'm Jeff.
and Jeff.
Yes, sir.
Yes, as we are hunkered down
Ah,
in
yes.
the headquarters, the underground headquarters of the Everyday Night,
Yes.
sheltered against all future apocalypses and current events. Not really, but it seemed an interesting topic to discuss that you brought up. So
Yeah, I this
introduce that.
uh popped up on my feed an interesting a philosopher who or someone a philosophy professor or student, I'm not sure, that we both follow will occasionally post a thought experiment that he's
Hmm.
known or explain some little bit of philosophy. Um, and they're always very interesting and they're relatively short and they give you something to think about. And this latest one he referenced the video game Fallout
Hmm. Which
and
is also a TV series.
also a TV series. Yes, and if you're not familiar with the game, it's about it's a post-apocalyptic sort of survival game where you start the game living in a Vault 51, I think it is,
Hmm.
and or, and you eventually venture out of the vault and have adventures in the post-apocalyptic world, right? But this philosophy question is, how would you populate if you were going to set up these, nationwide system of bunkers for people to survive a war, how would you populate them? How would you choose the people that you put or you'll allow into the bunker?
I think it's a really interesting question. And as we've mentioned before, community, humans evolved to have community, have societies. Community is essential for survival.
Right.
And that's the first thing. There's something else that I think is essential, if not for survival, at least for our discussions. And so, what are you drinking today? Did
Well,
you like my segue?
I did very,
I thought it
very
was a good
nice, very
segue.
nice.
Thank you.
And in fact, I think if not necessary for survival, it certainly does help uh, develop community and communication.
Yeah, it can. And
So I am having just some more of the proper 12 Irish whiskey with a um, smoked smoked cherry bitters.
nice.
And you, sir, what's your?
This is a Jack Rose. I've had it before. It's an old cocktail. It's apple brandy, grenadine, and lemon juice.
Hmm,
And it's apples fall. It seems appropriate. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So,
Here's to survival.
cheers.
So the question resonated with me, reminded me of a couple things. Um, my sixth grade teacher, Mr. Dale P. Harper, U.S. Navy retired. He was a great teacher. Among the other things he did, he had us invest in, as a class, in the stock market, buy one share. He had each of us, we got a fictional amount of money to invest. And um, we actually made money, a little bit of money, had a class party at the end of the year when we sold it. He taught us how to write a check and balance a checkbook. It was a
Nice
really good class.
for sixth grade. Sure.
Yeah, really good. Um, but he was also a civil defense warden, and he taught us what to do in case of emergencies, including fire, flood, tornado, which was an actual thing
Hmm.
in Indiana, hurricane, not a thing there, and also nuclear war.
No
And
volcano, no volcanic.
no, no.
Okay.
But I remember if we could convince our parents to build a fallout shelter, we would get an A in the class.
Okay.
So he was serious about it. And it's interesting because
Well,
um,
this would have been when?
so for mid 60s, mid
So
60s.
really the kind of the end. Well,
Well,
no, not the end of the
well,
Cold War, but
because because in 62, so only a few years before, from 6 October 16th to October 28th, 1962, was the Cuban Missile Crisis.
yes,
And I remember the stress, the tension among the adults. I felt it too, but they were really stressed. About a year before that, almost in September of 61, there was a Twilight Zone episode called The Shelter, episode
yes,
68, The Twilight Zone, where a guy builds a fallout shelter for his family, and then sirens go off, and there's announcements that the bombs are coming, and he puts his family in there, and the rest of the neighbors who didn't think they needed to want to break in and try to break in. Just as they break in and they're about to do terrible things to each other, the all clear comes. It was a false alarm. I remember watching that. Why the hell I was watching the Twilight Zone at that age, but it scared me. And
mm,
then the Cuban Missile Crisis a year later, and then a couple years after that, a few years after that, build a fallout shelter. And I could calculate based on because it was math too. It was
right,
good, it was a math problem. If the yield of the bomb is this much and it explodes this high above the air, what is the zone of immediate death? What's the zone of death within a certain amount of time? What's the zone? And you could calculate the radius and figure
yeah.
that all out. So that informs my thinking about this topic. I thought that was a useful background. I think that there have been a lot of apocalypse movies. There's post-apocalyptic movies,
You're right,
but there've been a lot of an impending apocalypse. We have to get to a shelter. Oh, the governments of the world have already been working together to build, like in the movie 2012, build these ark ships.
right,
Who
yeah,
gets on board? And then other things. Um, I think the best solution would be for some of the people to go on board the alien ship and then find out that To Serve Man is a cookbook, referencing
right, right.
another Twilight Zone episode. But there's certainly been a lot of those movies. So it's an interesting question. How would you, who would you pick? I think how many people, what percentage of them would you pick? There are different schemes for different approaches for how to do this. And I think this is something we could talk about.
Well, yeah, and the question is, do we need to decide what the minimum is? If we can, that this is a practical question of how many how many can you accommodate,
Right.
right? If there's so much into this question of, well, when are we building? Are we building the bunkers in anticipation of a problem? Are we having to rush building one because we know that impending doom is going to happen in 2 months? What, you know,
Yes. Do we
that in,
want to, is our intention to repopulate the earth, rebuild society,
or
like,
just survive a
or just
certain
survive for
incident?
a certain amount of time? Farnham's Freehold, which was a Heinlein story
Hmm.
about this
Yes.
sort of thing too. Um,
Yeah, there's so much science fiction around
yeah, a
this.
lot of it. So I think, yeah, the first question, as in so many problems, what are you trying to solve for?
Right.
What are you trying to accomplish? What's your objective? Is it repopulating the Earth.
Okay.
And I found some studies and they varied widely
Right.
from a low of 100 to 14,000,
Well, I
you know.
yes, and
So,
um, I considered this question when I was writing a story about planetary colonization as well,
mhm,
because the factors are the same.
yeah,
Um, and I, from what I found, I was determining that, or I determined that each individual community had to have at least 1,200 members, and then there were 12 12 individual communities total.
okay,
So you could disperse the communities, and then they could later on intermingle
okay.
to further increase genetic diversity. But
That's reasonable. That's
yeah,
entirely reasonable number.
1,200 seemed to be in the reading I was doing was like an absolute kind of minimum. You had to
Yeah.
have 1,200 for and you did in some of the research you've got here that to reduce genetic drift,
Yep.
and I'm not sure exactly what that is. I'd have to look that up in particular, but um,
Um,
160 to maintain a healthy genetic pool and 14,000 for a margin of greater margin of
yeah.
safety.
So genetic drift is um is um so reduced genetic diversity in population bottlenecks because of population
Right.
bottlenecks. So there's some disease or something, and so the the it's some disease that removes a significant portion of the genes of some members of the group. And so it causes a drift towards a lack of diversity. It's drifting towards a lack of diversity.
Oh,
So
okay. All right.
it reduces genetic variation because it the drift causes some gene variants to disappear. And you
Okay.
actually want some gene, you want variation. So
Another possibility I thought of is that you could, with sufficient preparation, you could have genetic samples of more people than you could actually feed.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that is a way to maintain genetic diversity with a smaller pool of survivors.
If in this scenario there was a since the only way of stockpiling genetic material is cryo storage of eggs and sperm,
Right.
that would be a way of doing it.
Well,
Um,
I mean, you can store, well, yeah, that's
that's the way of
diversity.
it's not like a computer disk with, we're not at that level of
No,
doing
no.
things. Um, the or brains, like Abby Normal, right? Um, uh, which, so there's a certain number um, that, and that's a place to sort of start thinking about it. But ultimately the philosophical question is not how many. That's a very pragmatic sort of approach to
Right.
this sort of thing. But again, what's the problem you're solving for? Is it for survival, repopulation? Uh, um, com,
Well,
what are you trying to do? Trying to
okay, let's assume that this is a world-killing event
okay,
and you have to repopulate the whole world. You have to rebuild society from basically from the ground up or whatever survives of society in your bunker.
right.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that introduces a lot of questions about how will the society be organized too.
Right.
But we can get into that. So um, again, we have said a number of times that humans evolved societies because they're stronger in societies. It was a evolutionary success
Hmm.
to have societies, and so it's still important. And humans have a range of abilities and skills. Would it be a skill-based approach? That's one approach. Would it be utilitarian to maximize fertility if that's the goal? Would it be people you trust, a community you already have? Would it be a cohesion of a group based on a common belief system or common ideology? So those are some of the approaches, and we can look at those. A lot of the post-apocalyptic or pre-apocalyptic or going into an apocalypse movies and stories tend to take a skill-based approach.
Yes.
It's
Well,
we
it
need
makes a certain amount of practical sense
right.
that you've got a limited number of people. They all have to be able to fill the incredibly diverse number of roles that
Right.
you have in a society. So you need to, if you've got a limited number, you've got to fill those necessary functions first.
Yes. Yeah. Um, and some of those functions, first, I think there's uh, one of the first things people think of, and they did this in the TV series Lost too. One of the characters was a doctor, and then lo and behold, they found medical supplies. It was great, but one of the characters was a doctor. That seems to be important.
Yes.
Yes, medical importance. Some kind of engineering. You think of what is the crew of the Enterprise, right?
Right. Yeah. They're mostly engineers.
Well, you've got the chief engineer, you've got medical, engineering, medical, science, command, because somebody
Right.
has to sort of run the ship. Would it be that quasi-military or even more strictly military structure? Would there be ranks? Would there be,
Well, I
you
think we
know?
are, as humans, we are in some ways, or in many ways, naturally hierarchical. And you can choose to take advantage of that or downplay that
Yeah.
in the organization you set up.
Um, Now on the Enterprise, they have replicators for food.
Right.
In aft post, I mean, um, what original series and later earlier versions don't have replicators. They have cooks, they have
Right.
chefs. Um, but assuming there's no replicator technology, you need food production. You need people
Right.
who can grow things. If you read and or saw The Martian, which is a great story and a great
Yeah.
movie, he was a exobotanist, I think,
Yeah.
or but he had to grow food. He had to science the shit out of it, right? As
Well,
he said.
literally.
Yeah. So food, it's the basic survival things. Shelter, food, water, healthcare, the Maslow's hierarchy. What are
Hmm.
those
Right.
physical needs? You need air. Air, we assume, would have to be the result of engineering. Water, we assume, would have to be the result of engineering. Food, the result of agricultural
Right.
science, a medical science. Um,
Now, I think it could be, it's possible. I think that you could mechanize your bunker sufficiently, and this has been explored in science fiction too, that you mechanize it sufficiently so that all you need to do is maintain the machines, and the machines do things for you. You don't need a farmer to run your hydroponic garden as long as the hydroponic garden is sufficiently engineered and you have people to collect the food, and you know
Right.
you can engineer around certain areas of knowledge.
Things always go wrong,
Well,
as
that's what I'm saying. You need
also in Star Trek, as we've seen, the the society that was everything was run by the computer, and then people forgot it was a computer, and then forgot how to fix
well,
a
right.
computer, and right. So you
And we're
need
also thinking about in terms of after after the bunker opens up and we're repopulating, you may need those skills to
right.
survive on the surface again.
So I think one of the things, and I think of this from it may have been Farnham's Freehold, I don't remember, but there was a character who was physically physically had physical ailments. But what he did have, and he presented himself to this, not it wasn't a bunker, but this stronghold of survivalists, and said, I'm not physically able, but I have an incredible resource. I have a library. And the library, each of the books, because it was still books,
Hmm.
each of the books is wrapped in waterproof material, and they are all buried in a waterproof, airtight cistern. And they include it was a vast library of practical knowledge that said if you really want to not just survive but rebuild the earth,
Hmm.
you need that, and I will exchange the location of that for safe harbor and care here. And they did. And so I think an extensive library would be essential of
Sure.
materials. Well, who can manage a library? And if it's digital, all digital, yeah, that takes up less space, but it uses a lot of energy. Whereas, books take up more space, but
Right.
they also need cataloging and they need organization, and somebody has to manage that resource and know how to retrieve information and find it. And so that kind of I think that's also a thing that would be useful if we're talking skill based. Um,
Well, you're also thinking, if we're thinking in terms of another consideration, like I said, is how long do you have to prepare? Because
yeah,
another thing you can do, another way to approach this is to say, we want all of the people who are physically most likely to survive and contribute positively to a gene pool, and then we can train them to do the things we need them to do, like a librarian.
right.
You can make a librarian out of anybody.
I think that says there's a certain amount of time that you're preparing.
Right, sure, that's what
That's
I'm saying.
real hardcore, what people would call a prepper mentality, that people are prepping for that sort of thing now. I
Well,
think,
it might be the kind of a astronomical event.
right.
Something has entered the solar system and it is on a direct course, but it's going to take a year and a half.
Have you read the three books or watched the first season of The Three Body Problem?
Yes, I've watched it. I have not read the book.
Great, great TV show. Really, really good. And that's some of what they're dealing with, although it's an adversarial
Right. Yeah,
alien that's coming, rather than just like a world-ending
right. Yeah, I'm
thing.
talking about some implacable disaster that you can't
Right,
fight,
right,
right? Because part of the three body problem is it's an alien invasion.
right.
Part of the consideration is, well, can we fight them? Well,
Yeah,
they're probably too advanced, but there's lots of considerations there. But
Right.
So, well, let's go back to the skill-based approach list that we have here,
Okay.
because this directly uh, talks about the next thing, the security specialist or military veteran.
Right.
Do you need a police force?
Well, do you need an internal police force? Do you need external protection? And the question of an internal police force is probably depends on how you selected people. And again, that gets to community and what approach you're taking. How how do you vet people to who would go into this? How do you screen them if they are strangers, if you are selecting from a wide group of people you don't know,
Hmm.
if you're in charge of this, how do you screen them to screen out antisocial tendencies, to screen out the kind of characteristics that would be anti-community, that would be deleterious to the community building?
Well, that brings up another question. Is the selection process one of application or invitation?
Well, and that's another approach. There have been some, again, science fiction where it's and most of them have been it's skill based. We need you because you have these skills. We don't need your husband or wife,
Right.
or you get to bring along somebody, or you don't, or and that introduces a bunch of questions for the purpose of storytelling. But how do you are people in those stories? People are selected and invited
Right.
because they fill a specific role. Well, what if you don't want to do that role? What if you know, I my my I had a painting teacher who had been a fingerprint analyst
Hmm.
for the Alaskan state version of their bureau, the Alaskan Bureau of Investigation, the state version.
Okay.
And he invented, if you've ever seen like CSI or one of those where they put an object in a chamber and aerosolize super
Hmm.
glue,
Hmm.
cyanoacrylate to bring out fingerprints. He invented that
Oh.
technique.
Hmm.
And the FBI offered him a position and he turned them down because he wanted to paint.
All right.
And so he moved from Alaska to a remote area in West Virginia, but he still consulted with the West Virginia version of the West
Okay.
Virginia Bureau of Investigation. And when I drove to his place, he said, "Stick to the main roads. Don't take a wrong turn. You don't want to run into some of the people you
Some of the
might run into."
denizens.
Yeah.
You find yourself driving past houses with washers and dryers on the porch.
Yeah. The people who would bring him squirrel tails because they shoot squirrels
Yeah.
for food. They bring him squirrel tail. He taught me how to make brushes, painting
Oh, all
brushes out
right.
of squirrel tails. They're it's fantastic. I still have squirrel tails in my freezer, in our
Well,
freezer.
yeah,
Um,
most I think I learned this when I was in school that most so-called camel hair brushes are actually squirrel tail.
yeah, and sable, if you can really get sable, but they're related anyway, I think.
Yeah.
But I can if you make the brush properly, it looks all fuzzy, but when you load it with paint of the proper consistency, you can make a single line that just goes on and on and on. It's very thin grade. They're great for hair and trees and grass and other
So that, well,
insects. But
getting back, getting
yeah,
how valuable is an artist to a colony like this?
well, that's a really good question. I think artists, writers, musicians, poets are are essential. What what is survival without that sort of thing? Is it, I
Well,
mean,
yes, and how hard is it to survive without it? I mean, what's
yeah,
how do you deal with the stresses and the
right.
psychological weight of being in a bunker like that without some kind of art, without some
Yes.
kind of release?
And people would need psychologists and counselors. I mean, even the Enterprise had a counselor, right?
Yeah.
The later in the next generation. Um, I think they also would be teachers if they're going to be children. And if you're talking about repopulating, then they're going to be teachers. Um, and you said, well, you pick people who, and you can, if you have time, you pick people for their health and fertility, assuming, and you can teach them things. You and I both know that there are people who taught who were not great teachers.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Teaching yeah, it's a skill that can be learned, but not everybody has the aptitude for it.
Right.
Um, and like not everybody has the aptitude. You can't teach everybody to be an engineer. You can't teach everybody to be a medical professional. You can't
No,
teach
right.
everybody to be a counselor.
No, so I would say that after you've got a good physical pool or have determined what the necessary physical pool is going to be, then you recruit for those things, and the things that you can't fill, you train for,
Right,
right? You're screening for aptitude as well as uh, experience,
right.
right? And I think you could, someone more apt at writing algorithms than I am, you could prioritize things in a matrix so that you're looking for these things in everyone.
Hmm.
And then as you fill the matrix, you can specialize in in other things.
Yeah. Now, I think a different approach would be to prioritize people who are trustworthy. Um,
That's a hard
because,
one.
well, it beyond a group that you already know, it gets more difficult beyond a certain size. In fact, I don't remember what the size of, there's a certain size of community-based decision making, consensus-based
Mm.
decision making, beyond which it becomes really difficult and you have to have representative government and that sort of thing. But even in a small group, people can sabotage, and you and I have both watched this,
Mm.
can sabotage consensus decision making. And it so there are people I trust. There are people who I would trust to share my bunker, but it's not, it would be about survival, not about repopulation at that point.
Well, and that's the other thing. The people that I could trust would not be a sufficient genetic sample to survive. Um,
Yeah,
that circle would extend to about 30 people, and then that's it. I'm done.
yeah,
And about 10 of them are like, well, we'll see.
yeah,
So as
yeah,
far as I know, they're okay, but yeah, there aren't.
yeah.
There's an
Um,
asterisk.
well, and family pets, do we animals? And this has been a question in for people when they are evacuating in
Yeah,
an emergency. Um, it is not every shelter for certain emergencies has allowed people to bring their family pets. And
right.
there are people who have stayed in place rather than abandon their pets. There are also people who have abandoned their pets. And there's it's another movie, apocalyptic movie, um, aliens who detect sound, so everybody has to stay quiet. I forget what the
Yeah,
name
right.
of it is.
A Quiet Place.
I think it might be. And they're trying to get away. The family's trying to get away, and their dog is barking out the back of the station wagon at the alien, and the father pushes the dog out or opens the window or something, and the dog goes out and charges it, and they drive off. And the children are distraught.
Mm.
But yeah, it was a brutal decision, but the father was prioritizing the children and the family over the family pet. Um,
I wonder if you recall what I found one of the most harrowing episodes of MASH, the television show MASH.
yeah,
Um, Hawkeye has a psychotic
yeah,
break,
yeah. I remember the one you're talking about.
and after lots of psychotherapy and some severe hypnotic regression, and he tells a tale of being on a bus with a bunch of native Koreans, and I don't remember why they had to be quiet. There was a patrol nearby or something, and they had to be quiet. And he kept talking about this woman having to strangle a chicken so that it
Yeah,
wouldn't make any noise. And after lots of painful, really great acting, but lots of painful revelation, he's it's a woman smothers her own child
yeah,
because it won't be quiet,
yeah,
and he can't deal with that, and
yeah.
that throws him into this psychotic state where he regresses back to being a child himself.
Yes. And yeah, that was painfully brilliant episode.
Oh yeah.
That
Oof.
was it was, as you said, harrowing. Um, Reminded me of Sophie's Choice.
Oh yes.
Yeah, which was yeah, also difficult. Um, Oof. Yeah,
So
so I think the that is a I think that's a question for people. I know for a long time growing up, where I did, where we kept a shovel inside the house because at least once a year we'd have to shovel our way outside
yeah.
through the
Yep.
snowbank that drifted up over the door. So we've always kept food and supplies in the house because of weather and such things. And now the um, FEMA and ready.gov, I think is the site, they tell you to have food and water for 3 days, which is pretty
It's minimal.
inadequate, minimal. It should really be more than that. But you should have, if you have pets, you should have to have food for them too.
But it's
Um,
also interesting that they say that because it's also been shown, or a study was shown that someone who goes without food for 3 days will resort to violence. That is a breaking point when power and food are denied a community for 3 days. That is when violence starts.
is what they say that society is only ever 3 meals away from revolution.
Yeah.
It- um, I'm paraphrasing that, I think, but and I don't know who said it, but um, I think that that's a bare minimum and an adequate minimum, and you should have more. And if you have winters like we have here, I've got stuff I've regularly keep stuff in the car,
Yeah,
a shovel and blankets and food and
but
water because you
yeah, but
don't
that's for
know.
like over maybe would get you over through overnight
Yeah,
in your
but
car.
that's yeah, probably all you need.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
I mean, we could not, and we did, in fact, several times during the COVID lockdown, we could easily subsist on the food we've got for a week, 10
yeah,
days maybe,
yeah,
just in the food we've got in the house. If you weren't picky about, you know, a diverse meal and you got to have your starch and your protein and a vegetable. If you weren't picky about that, if you just needed to survive, we could go 10 days, 2 weeks,
yeah, yeah,
just what's in. But if we lose power for that 2 weeks,
yeah.
the whole equation changes because now we
Well,
don't have a way to preserve all the food we have.
yes. Well, um, we got a generator for that.
And that's good until its fuel runs out.
Yes.
You can't get
And
more fuel if there's a general power outage.
you can't get more fuel, but that would give us a little more time,
Yeah.
you know. So, and if you focus only on the things you absolutely need to run. I mean, we've lost power for days and kept the freezer and the refrigerator closed and
Right. Sure.
things stayed pretty well. I think one of the things about disasters, and this is something again, going back to sixth grade and studying that, and then newer information coming out since then, that disaster planning often relies on the idea that a disaster is localized and therefore resources to help
Can be
alleviate
brought
it
in.
can come in from the outside. Well,
Hmm.
that can't happen if it's
Right.
everywhere.
Right.
So, um, so, um, I,
We're talking about the skill-based approach and what
yes,
kinds of jobs do we have? Um, but you have in your list here the utilitarian approach is another way, which is really brutal.
yes.
That
Well,
is
and
what,
again, it's what are you trying to accomplish? And if your objective is repopulation, then you go for fertility, young, healthy, childbearing age, survival of the species, and everybody who's not contributing to that doesn't get in.
right. Yeah, and it doesn't list here, but I think that and what are your testing procedures, but as far as like, do you have any genetic markers for disease
Right.
or, you know, chronic conditions or something, you would be filtered out.
And this is also, we've seen this in science fiction. Gattaca, I
Hmm.
think, was did that. Um,
And it's almost like an enforced eugenics kind of a
yeah.
program.
And if that's what we do to survive, do we deserve to?
Well, I guess I think in many ways there's a break, survival of the species
Yeah.
trumps moral consideration.
Well, unless you say that is the primary ethical consideration, is
Okay,
survival of the
sure.
species. Um, it's
It's like
human.
Machiavelli's war that the survival of the state
Yeah.
is after the survival of the species is the survival of a sovereign nation.
Well, if you
And
remember, well, really, again, with the cultural pop cultural references. Um, Ender's Game,
Hmm.
where his final strategy, he still thinks it's a game. His final strategy is to have a core
Right.
delivery of the weapon surrounded by essentially expendables,
Yes.
and they are expended, but the deliverable hits the target and destroys the enemy. And then he realizes he's actually done that for real. Um,
And and destroyed an entire other
yeah,
species.
yeah. Um, Orson Scott Card, great stories. It's a shame he's an asshole. So, um, but
We should do an episode about separating the art from the artist.
yeah, we've mentioned it a couple of times. I
Yeah.
don't know that we've done one specifically about that, but we've certainly referred to it. Um, I think we may have. I have to
We
check.
may have talked about
Um,
that. I know
so
we've talked about it. I don't, like you say, I don't know that we've
yeah,
dedicated a whole episode to it, but
I think that's um, but that's also, yeah, that takes the reason that they hid that from him, the generals hid from him that it was real,
Ender you're talking about.
Ender, was they didn't want him to hesitate doing what
Right.
he had to do. Um, and he likely would have, both for the fact of the those who were expended and for the destruction of the other species completely. Um,
Yeah, can you justify the survival? Can you justify destroying another species so that yours can survive? Is that morally justifiable? And that's part of that whole book and the subsequent the sequel
yeah. Well,
is explored.
and I think it relates, it's the issue that is often discussed now about war. And again, I'll repeat something I've said before. For people in the United States whose country has been at war for most of its nearly 250-year history, Americans know fuck all little about war.
Right. We haven't
Um,
really.
they don't know about what it is, what it means. They don't understand the realities, the language. Um, and I only understand it secondhand from study,
Oh
but
yeah.
I
We
consider it a responsibility to understand it because it's such a prevalent issue. There are people whose people uh, people don't read the fucking syllabus, you know. So, but that's you're talking human versus human. It's not human versus alien species, and
well, and to be fair, in the Ender books, it is an unreasonable, implacable enemy. They can't figure out a way. At least in the first book, they haven't figured out a way to communicate with it. They just
yeah,
know that it is coming and it kills everything.
yes.
So
Um, well, and that's there's a movie, Elevation. Um,
haven't seen it.
Elevation, aliens suddenly appear and kill humans, only humans,
Mm,
but they can't go above 8,000 feet.
okay. How did they
It's
get here without the ability to? Okay, well, yeah, whatever.
yeah, it's actually I think it would have been I think it was an idea for a hour-long Twilight Zone episode, not necessarily for a movie, you know.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, I fast forwarded through a bunch of it.
Oh, all right.
But Um,
But so this talk about war kind of brings us to the next method, psychological and social approach.
yeah,
So beyond skills and demographics, there's um, morale and group cohesion,
yes,
and this gets into ideologies, I think. Um, Morale and group cohesion and red flags, uh, violence, impulsiveness, extreme ideologies are red
yeah,
flags,
yeah,
and I agree with that.
yeah,
I think you can afford, like the American experiment was supposed to be, a diverse ideologies with as long as you can adhere to a central core of general principles of tolerance and limits,
yes.
governing that.
So, as somebody said that the term melting pot for the United States is incorrect. It's more like a charcuterie board. That the
More of a
individual
goulash.
the individual flavors are still there, but they are complementary and
Okay.
make a whole. The problem is if and this is a question, this is, I think, the concern that people have about immigration.
Hmm.
My grandparents were immigrants, but they came to the United States and said, and they kept their religious practices, they kept their beliefs, but they also said, we're Americans now,
Right.
and we will treat other people with respect, and we will vote, and we will obey the laws, and we will do that sort of thing. But we will also observe the practices of our religion and our community. And I think that the there have been examples of people moving to a new country and then not accepting the ethos of the country they moved to, and
Okay.
not simply keeping separate and doing their own thing, but wanting to impose their way on the larger community. And that is problematic. And I don't think that's widespread, but I think that there are concerns, people have concerns about that. So I think that extreme ideologies can destabilize a group. If an entire group is made of extreme ideologies, everybody who adheres to an extreme ideology, that's problematic because what I've seen is it's a variation on holier than thou. It's more
Purity.
extreme than
It's
now,
purity
more
tests.
purity tests. And I think that's a problem. I think not only genetic diversity, but diversity of thought
Hmm.
is essential for survival.
Well, yes,
Groupthink is destructive.
a diversity of thought with a mechanism that promotes and protects that diversity,
Yes. Yeah.
right? So this is what our First Amendment was supposed to be,
Yes.
um, and has
And
been
it's under and
weaponized.
it's under attack right now.
Well, it has been over our entire history. It has been weaponized in some ways,
Yeah.
one way or another, um, and that's okay. But the problem we have now, and the problem that we could have in our bunker here is uh, recognizing what it's supposed to do and not simply trying to take advantage of it for your own ideology,
Right.
right? So I think that we have our Bill of Rights,
Yeah.
and I think that they have come under some questionable uh, um, interpretation.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that has been kind of the problem.
Yeah.
Um,
Money
and
is
that may always be a
money
problem.
is free speech, but money is speech. yeah, I think that's
Right,
one of the
which means some
questionable.
people have more speech than others, and that's
Right,
not,
right.
yeah.
Um, I think it does raise the question then, not only how do people get into the bunker, how does somebody get kicked out of the bunker? Because
Well, this,
it's always a question, not only how does somebody earn an accolade, earn an
hmm
honor, how do they lose it? What does it take to do that? So how does somebody get kicked? What does it take? So what are the governing set of rules? What are the, is it like Logan's Run? You hit 30 and you go to
yeah, right.
whatever they called that, right? Which was just a way of controlling the population. Um, uh, what it, so it's a question. What crimes? I think there's a Voyager, Star Trek Voyager had a character in a couple of episodes who was a murderer, and he was found guilty of it, and but they had no death penalty, and so they imprisoned him. So he was imprisoned in the brig on a
hmm
permanent basis until they had a use for him. I don't remember what the use was. It was a later episode. They had a use for him, and he got out, or they let him out, and he actually redeemed himself to the degree he could by sacrificing himself for the survival of the ship. Um,
Or like Snake Plissken.
yeah, well, it was the guy who played Wormtongue. Great actor, great at being creepy as hell. Great actor whose name I can't recall at the moment. Um, Brad Dourif,
Oh,
really
okay.
good, really good. Um,
Now, however, now let me point out while we're talking about this, that early, well, not, I mean, not particularly, not ancient, but, medieval even, agrarian communal society, right? And I've had this conversation with other people that communism isn't inherently bad. Most agrarian societies use communism in its sort of basic form of communities.
yeah, I'd call it communalism rather than
Okay,
because
right.
communism has taken on a very specific name. So to
It
distinguish it
has.
from that, yeah,
Yes. So before they had, before there was such a thing as prison,
yeah,
there were really only two punishments. There was there was death
yeah,
and exile.
yeah,
So that's kind of what we're talking about here. You violated the laws, you're exiled. You are outside, or outlawry is another name
yeah,
for, you are outside the law. You are no longer protected by the laws. That's what an outlaw means. We in America we romanticize the whole outlaw thing. And that's we
yeah,
view it as someone an outlaw being someone who doesn't care about the laws, who is you know rejecting law, and it's a rebellious type of thing. But the real meaning of outlaw is you are no longer protected
yeah,
by the law. Any rights you might have had as a human being and part of this community are gone.
yeah.
Imagine what that actually means. I
Oh,
mean, now you are
yeah,
not, anyone can kill you, harm
yeah,
you, take your property. You have no recourse. You are outside the law.
yeah,
So, I mean, that's important to this discussion too, right? That,
yeah. Well, yeah. So uh, it in considering this question, I have a renewed respect for the founders of the United States, and what they went through to craft the governing documents.
Yeah.
Uh, what an incredible challenge. And the compromises that they made that eventually led to problems and the lack of clarity sometimes in what they wrote, intentional ambiguity, I think, has come back to bite us in some ways. But damn, they did an amazing, amazing thing.
Well, yeah, it was pretty new.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
a representative republic made up of smaller individual governing
yeah,
bodies,
yeah,
states,
yeah,
um, was kind of unheard of. I mean, that they picked and chose historical models,
yeah,
and then they argued about them until they could get them to kind of fit together.
yeah,
But yeah, it's an incredible undertaking
yeah,
to try and offset the only history they had really, besides the Greeks, which they had a sort of democracy, but it was looking back at it with some distant lens, you can see that it was as much a plutocracy or an
yeah,
autocracy.
yeah.
Um,
Well, and there
but
was
yeah,
the
so
Roman Republic, um, and
which eventually became a dictatorship
yeah,
before its fall. So yeah, they and other than that, they basically had monarchy as a model
yeah,
of one kind or another. So how do you, you know, this is the model. All of our histories have this as their
yeah,
as the only way it can be done. Um, how could we design something from scratch that would be better?
yeah. Um, I've said the the first. I've said this when teaching. Um, uh, Asked students what the essential thing is for anyone to do business with anyone else. What is the first, most important, essential thing?
Trust.
Exactly. Congratulations, you get an A. It's because you have to trust.
I've had I've sat through so many of your lectures
Yeah,
without ever setting foot in
yeah,
your classroom.
yeah. It's true. You have to trust you're going to get what you pay for. You have to trust that you're going to be paid for what you're offering. Trust has to exist. Without that, there's no basis for an exchange. And that's what business is, an exchange.
Well,
Um,
although in a modern society, trust is sometimes also based on the law that if you enter into this contract with someone, if they do not fulfill that, if they break trust, there is a recourse.
right.
And so
And
part of that trust is based on I can come after you if you don't keep your word.
yes, there it's and that the people who the libertarians who argue against the need for certain aspects of government. It's like what you would not be doing these things without the courts, without anyway. That's
Yeah.
another issue that the dismantling of the so-called administrative state, which when you get above a certain size of community, it takes more people to manage and run. It it has to it does. Um
Well,
what are
all these libertarians see themselves as Kevin Costner on the Dutton Ranch, right?
yeah,
That's the fantasy in their head is that I've got my land and I'll defend my land and I got my boys and you
yeah,
know
yeah,
there's just not enough room for everybody to be that guy.
Yes. And we've got 340 million
Million?
people in the United States and 8 billion people now in the world. It takes it takes work. People who say, "Well, you never worked. You have work in government." That's work. That is not
Oh
easy.
yeah.
There's a lot to manage. Anybody who's ever tried to anybody who's ever held any kind of office in a group, a club, an organization that has a couple dozen people
Right.
knows the challenges of doing that. If once it gets to be much larger than that, you have to things have to be delegated. There are people who never delegated anything or managed the people they've delegated work to.
Right. Yeah. Right.
It's yeah. So I think that that's another question for the in terms of skill based. Depending on the size, people need will need areas of responsibility. Like what is the crew complement of the enterprise?
Which
Crew
one?
of enterprise. That's a good question. Um,
Because the original NCC 1701, not the aircraft carrier,
yeah,
but the original Starship Enterprise from the original series, I think had a complement of 400 and change,
right.
and
And
the next generation had something like 15, 1600.
um, approximately 1,000 to 6,000 crew members, civilian residents, and families.
1,000 to 6,000 seems like a
A lot, a
stupidly
big,
broad
huge
range.
range. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so
And that's not crew complement.
no,
You said crew complement.
yeah, 1,000 personnel
Okay.
and oh no, an aircraft carrier has a crew population of over 6,000 personnel, and the Enterprise D's crew is only about 1,000 personnel, including family. So, um, so interesting. Um, yeah. So, but in that, and so there's a military organization to it. There's rank,
Hmm.
although it's a lot more relaxed than a lot of actual military organizations.
Right.
Um, there's the head of engineering. There's the chief engineer, the chief medical officer, the chief. There are and the captain and has a first officer who, and they
Hmm.
each have assigned duties and responsibilities. And the question would be if you're going with what did you say your number 1,400?
For I thought it.
Your
Oh
bunker?
well, this was in your list here. There was about 1,400 for genetic
Yeah. So,
diversity. No, 14,000. Sorry,
oh, you no, you said 1,200 for was your
I
minimum.
said 1,200.
$1,200.
This was many
Right.
years ago. I was looking this up, and I
Right.
thought it was around 1,200
But
for a single
at
community.
at 1,200 for a single community, there has to be there have to be people with responsibilities in oversight in various areas,
Right.
and there have to be people then coordinating that. So there has to be some actual management ability for in of the
Sure.
skills, and decision making. There has to be a mechanism for decision making. Consensus takes time. There has to
Hmm.
be, and yeah, on something like a starship, there's time to consult sometimes
Right.
with the
Well, now we see that in the
captain,
next generation a
yeah,
lot, where the the crew, the
Senior
command
officers.
staff, right?
Right.
Senior officers sit around a conference table and they all give their recommendations to the captain, and the captain then makes a decision
Right.
based on that input. And
Yep.
a good captain, a just captain, will try and balance all of the input and make the best decision for everybody
Right.
with his with and even he has a hierarchy for decision making,
Right.
like preserve the ship, preserve as many of the crew as possible, maintain
The prime
discipline.
directive and so on.
Right, right.
Right.
So there's even that decision making has a hierarchy
Yeah.
that's part of training as an officer.
Yeah. So would it have that kind of structure, and
I think that's a structure.
yeah,
Um, that also accounts for, as you mentioned earlier, accounts for areas of specific knowledge.
yeah,
Um, but you could think of it more less of a military um, thing and think of it as more like a cruise ship type of an organization. Think of it like that, where you've got a certain number of professionals making sure that the passengers are taken care of and
okay.
survive the trip, but the passengers don't necessarily have any hands on any of the controls.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it. So the passengers would be um,
The genetic stock.
yeah, they're reproducing animals. Um,
Right.
well, and then there's another question: animals. Not just pets, but I haven't watched. I don't remember in Fallout what they were doing for food in the vaults. If they had growing things, or were they all vegetarians? Did
I think they were,
synthetics or you know,
having played the game, I think it was all like vat grown meat
yeah,
and vegetables,
yeah,
um, uh, hydroponic vegetables.
yeah. So I think that's a question, is it going to be, I think managing livestock on a in a bunker would be impossible.
Yeah, well, I think animals certainly introduce a huge variable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so
Now you've
yeah,
got veterinary medicine, you've got livestock tending, you've got, yeah, and the way farming is done takes a lot of space.
typically, yeah.
Typically, water, resources. So, yeah. Um,
Now, just kind of as an aside, when I was writing my planetary um, colonization story, your the people that were going to make up your colony were just kept in stasis the whole time, right? So you could think of it as think of that. Now you're not worried about how the bunker itself governs itself. It doesn't. You don't have to worry about anything until you wake everybody up when it's safe.
yeah. Um,
That would save a lot of resources.
well, yeah, if we had that technology.
Well, yeah.
So that's assuming a level of technology we don't have. At that point, there's a there was an Outer Limits episode many years ago. Robert Culp had a glass hand and with missing fingers, and he was searching for the fingers. And as he plugged in a finger, eventually he recovered memories. Spoiler, he was actually an android, not a human with a glass hand. And
Okay.
he restored collecting the fingers restored all his memories, and he was carrying all of humanity, the collected minds and personalities of every person on Earth, um, um, and carrying them into the future because there was a alien invasion, and he killed the last aliens, and now he was alone and waiting for a time when he could restore humanity. Waiting
How,
alone into, yeah, it was,
how
yeah.
did how's he going to biologically recreate humanity?
I don't remember.
Okay.
It, damn, it was like 60 years ago. So,
Well, there was a Star Trek episode too where they come upon this planet where all these minds are in spheres, right?
oh
And
yeah,
they're
yeah,
supposed to
yeah,
inhabit
yeah.
the crew for short periods of time, and some of them decide, I'm just going to keep this body.
Oh, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, Let me see. The Outer Limits. The Outer Limits. Yep. Demon with a Glass Hand. Season 2, Episode 5. Continuance of the human race against alien invaders depends on a man with an complete glass computer hand and no memory of his past. Written by Harlan Ellison.
Okay.
So, yeah, Man with the Glass Hand. It was really good. Really good. Um, Robert Culp. Yep. Really good episode. I'm gonna have to watch that again. Have to find a place where I can watch that. I
So,
remember when I saw Johnny Mnemonic
yeah.
that it reminded me of that. It seemed like a version of that sort of, but
Mm.
not as good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, not one of Keanu Reeves' better
yeah,
choices, I think, but
yeah. Um, so I I I think given all of these systems, I come down on the side of trusted community, and a trusted community and a big ass library of how to do stuff yourself. You know,
okay.
I think that, um, and I'm not sure I'm not sure my focus would be on repopulating the earth. So,
Well, and I don't know if that would be my focus either. I think it would be a base assumption
right.
that why survive if you're not going to reclaim the surface at some point?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well,
uh,
depending on the scenario,
well, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, if you're are we, well, that's another question. Are we building a bunker or are we building an ark?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That's a whole other way to look at it,
Are we
which is
going
the
to
way I was
be
looking
the Eloi or the Morlocks?
at it. Well, so I'm going with the sort of basic assumption that you had enough time to build a bunker to house a certain population.
Okay.
So to me, that implies you've got a certain amount of time to make your selections.
Okay.
I think that time,
We have to in this make certain assumptions
yes,
to be
yes,
able to come up with a
right.
reasonable thing.
So we one of our number one assumption is there a bunker exists,
Okay.
a bunker large enough for more than just your immediate family,
Okay.
right? So we have to have some kind of selection process. That implies to me a certain amount of time required to build the bunker, and therefore a certain amount of time to come up with a selection process.
Okay.
So my selection process, I think, would not focus on repopulation. It is a secondary or tertiary concern. And repopulation, I think, is pretty easy given the numbers involved.
You definitely need medical. facilities.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
but what I would focus on is a system that, first of all, repopulation doesn't matter if you can't survive until you can leave. So
Okay.
my focus would be on internal governance first,
Right.
then, or alongside systems maintenance,
Okay.
right? So yeah, you've got to survive. That's the whole
Yeah.
point of the bunker is survival, right? So you've got to have a system that is either maintenance free, which is a fantasy.
Yeah.
Um, so you've got to have mechanisms and people and, as you say, manuals, books, knowledge. The knowledge has to be
Tools, materials,
right,
fabricate ability to fabricate parts,
right. And
energy to run things.
well, those are practical
Yeah.
things that we kind of assume. What we're talking about is how do you staff it?
Right. Right.
Where do the people come from, and what kind of people do you want?
Yeah.
I think like I said, a system of governance that allows diverse viewpoints, ideologies, but around a core of fact-based, secular,
Ethical
ethical
principles.
knowledge and practice.
Yep.
You are allowed to believe anything you want. You're allowed to practice anything you want, as in the and it harm none, do what thou wilt,
Yeah.
right? That's these are the core tenets that you have to adhere to. Everybody has to touch this particular stone or you can't get in.
Right.
If you're willing to do that, nobody really cares what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that the numbers then are purely, well, how many do we need? What kind and what mechanism, what other
Well,
mechanisms can we have
so
that
what about reproduction within the bunker? Because
well,
that could tax resources. And what about bringing children into the bunker?
I think that would have to be a strictly limited, the bunker is designed for a certain population,
Right.
I would say. And so you can you can maintain that by either by both limiting and encouraging birth when it's necessary.
Yeah. So it
Because
would,
people are still going to die. One of the questions
yeah.
is, well, how long do we expect to be in here?
Yeah. Because if if you limit reproduction in the bunker and you're in the bunker for so long that people are
Right.
past the age of fertility, then you have then repopulation won't be viable anyway.
Right. And I mean, just off the cuff, I could say when someone dies, right, in the bunker of old age or whatever cause, there's a lottery. Not so lot, maybe not so much a lottery as an application process
Hmm.
for couples, whatever, to apply to fill that slot.
Okay.
And then the application process is, well, are you close to the end of your reproductive? You get first choice if you're 19 or whatever,
You got time.
you've got plenty of time. You're not in the lottery yet.
So, our like going back to Star Trek again, it was a next generation first season episode, I think, where a planet of people had to be evacuated, and then there was another planet of people who were the population was dying because they were cloning and cloning multiple generations and
No.
replicative failure, and so they were going to mix them, and every and they couldn't maintain a monogamous
Oh, right. Yeah.
relationships because they needed to encourage diversity. Uh, and So would that be a consideration in in there? Would say if a couple has children, are they limited to one? Would they have to then have children with other? I mean, this gets very draconian, really.
Oh, you can certainly,
Yeah,
and an underlying eugenic
yeah,
um, consideration there, but
yeah,
um, I think that again, and again, it depends on your sample. How
yeah,
big a population do you have to work with?
yeah,
Um, I think that y biologically, you've got to have a male and a female,
yeah.
unless we have some other technology that allows,
Well, and you need
parthenogenesis of some
experts.
kind.
You need experts in resource management too.
Yeah,
You need. I mean,
however, an expert in resource management, a real genuine expert or a committee of experts in resource management could write a manual. And this is we see in a lot of these sort of,
yeah,
the bunker that's been there for 100 years, they have the book, right? The
right. E plebnista,
well,
right?
that's
They don't
that's
understand. They have the book, but they don't understand it anymore.
yeah. Well,
I have seen situations where someone longtime expert in a very particular area was let go by a company, replaced with a much less expensive new hire. Before they could be trained, the person was just let go. It's like keep them on to let them train their replacement because if you don't, the institutional memory is going to be gone and that's going to be problematic. And so I think just the book, I don't know that it's enough. We've both read instruction manuals that were shit.
yeah, well,
So,
yeah, sure. Um, but I think that in some cases, the urgency or the importance of the instruction manual is not as high as what we're talking about here, right? If like this is just my job, I got to write this manual and it's good enough.
right. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
urgency is not the
Well,
same.
one of the first things in a job in an organization that you should be focused on is finding and training your replacement, particularly and depending on the organization,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that would absolutely be the case. If there's a head of department, they absolutely need multiple
Oh, yeah.
um, people right under them learning the job as well. Uh,
And you see that in a lot of these, this bunker science fiction that we're
yeah,
talking about, this
yeah,
survival science fiction, that there's always, and there's always a lot of politics too, usually to drive the storyline of who's
yeah.
going to succeed at the top spot because they got a little nicer apartment or whatever.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
You're going to retire to your bunker pretty soon.
Pretty soon, I think. I think we have talked about this, and I think the not that I'm bailing because I just yawned, but I think the more we talk about it, the more complex it is, and the more of a the more of an oversimplification a lot of these stories are about the
Well, yeah,
complexity of it.
you can't explore every nuance of every aspect in every story,
Yeah,
right? That's why we
yeah,
have more than one author in the whole world.
yeah,
But this was an interesting exercise, and I agree. We're not going to come to any conclusions here
yeah.
or write our own manuals, but some of these things apply to societies in general.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I think that ultimately it would be one of the goals would be that every individual could find their purpose in a society. And that would be wonderful. But too much of society is about is not about
Commodification.
it's not about that. It's not about people finding their purpose. It's about acquisition or competition or um so yeah.
Yeah.
So um I think we've covered it.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So, everybody out
Yeah.
there in your bunkers,
Yeah. Um
like and subscribe and share and comment and
yeah,
do all the
please.
things.
How would you choose who goes in the bunker with you?
Yeah.
Would
You
you
got a better
choose
way?
would you choose yourself for the bunker?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
That would
yeah,
require a certain amount of reflection.
yeah.
Would, well, here,
What
would you put
have you
yourself in the,
done to make yourself worthy
yeah.
and indispensable to
Are
get
you
into the
useful
bunker?
enough to be
Are you
included?
useful? Yeah, yeah,
Well, now I've got something to think about.
yeah. Well,
All right.
okay.
Well, so until you decide you're useful enough,
Yeah.
be thou
A good night.
and true.